working remotely with very fuzzy email and trying to poke it into my iPad that kept going down. So I'm really not illiterate. It just looks that way with those emails. But the reason that we have called you here is that I don't know, we have had some complaints from some members of the community and some Facebook posts and whatever about using the back door, being asked to use the back door of the bus. And the background of this is back of, and I think I sent everybody an email of the memo that I believe came from May of 2020, back when it was safer at home. And it was not, according to our city attorney, ever voted on by the commission. But what had happened is we were following CDC guidelines at the time. That was a time at Safer at Home. We were not having a lot of meetings, and it was a department decision, which a lot of department decisions were done to provide COVID protocols. The protocol was to load anybody that could through the back door, keeping, lessening the contact between riders and the driver. We were trying to keep the drivers safe at that point. So with things that are changing, the drivers have been trying to use their discretion on deciding who would maybe need to use the front door and who could possibly use the back. I personally had some issues with that, and with our new protocols in place with TSA, protocols of mask mandate involved in transit, which requires masking of all riders, which we did not have before, plus with the plexiglass, I am putting this one portion in of changing the protocol of allowing anyone who asks, any rider who asks to use the front door, be allowed to. And so we called you together to get your feedback on possibly changing this protocol at this time. So, and I just want to caution everyone, this is a very limited scope that we are talking about today. So we are not going to take any other issues that you've heard, any other complaints, anything else. This is just talking about loading through the front door. Anybody would like to speak? Ms. Zorn, go ahead. We can't hear you, Kathy. Hang on.
Oh, Kathy, it looks like you're muted.
Okay, sorry.
Perfect,
There
we
you
can hear
go.
you now.
Okay. Per the Daily Herald, since new cases since last week, it's 46. We're not out of the woods. Only 20% of the bus drivers had their first shot. I feel a meeting should first be held with the transit management and the persons making the complaint before we open the city bus front door to everyone. Maybe they could come to a solution to this matter. And I feel this should be put on hold and put on the next Transit Commission meeting agenda when the transit director can be at the meeting. And the bus rider needs to make a request for the front door or ramp or kneeler when they need the front door. And we need to protect the drivers and the riders. If we don't do that, we won't have any transit in this community, and then no one will have a ride. And currently, we need bus drivers, but we need to protect the pool of bus drivers that we have right now, so I still feel we should use the back door and only open the front door when a passenger requests it or a driver realizes that someone needs the front door. Thanks.
Anyone else? Oh, I'm sorry, Pat, I did not see, I just saw your hand, go ahead.
It just went up.
There you go.
No problem at all. I'm just wondering if you have any idea of how many people have felt they've been wronged by the current practices. I only know of two. Before Kathy spoke, I was ready to make the motion to rescind that protocol. And I'm still fairly ready, but I don't know how we would handle it another way and each individual who feels they should be able to make use of that front door is going to have a separate meeting with the director, or I don't know how that would work. Maybe Kathy could talk about that. She's got her.
All they need to do is let the driver know they can't get in the back door, and the driver's supposed to let them in the front door. That's all they need to do, is just say, I can't make the step or whatever, they will let them in the front door. Not everybody's using a walker or a wheelchair, or it's not always easy for the driver to identify, and it is partly the passenger's responsibility to let the driver know. In the past, I know for myself, when I use the grocery cart to get groceries, I let the driver know I need the ramp. So that's a simple solution.
Yeah, if I could respond, I think that's pretty much hitting the nail on the head as to where the problem is that the driver is pulling up and the allegation is that they are not being allowed, at least not without getting some flack about it, they're not being allowed to make that decision. If it was working that way, if when they pulled up and asked to use the front door, we wouldn't be here.
I agree. Go ahead,
Jen does
Deb.
have her hand raised.
What?
Jen has her hand raised. Jen?
Oh, Jen, I'm sorry, Jen first and then Deb. Go ahead.
I appreciate both of these comments, and I think it's helped me understand. So it sounds like the problem is that the way that the policy is currently is just not being enforced, or it's not working. So I guess the question is, with that being said, is the solution that we want to make sure that the policy is going to be followed into, moving forward, and, or do we want to change the policy based on non-compliance? And I guess my question, like, to help me clarify, is Greg not with us today? Is that right?
Greg is with us. Greg, do you want to answer that, or would you like me to? No, I can. Okay.
So, sorry, and like a follow-up question I have is, have we talked to the drivers? Because I've seen a lot of stuff on social media about people's versions of what's happened with the door, with people requesting that the front door be opened, and then that request being ignored or denied. And I guess I'm wondering if we've spoken with the bus drivers who were involved with that, and if there's been any agreement on that.
Well, first I'll start with Pat's question about have we gotten a lot of complaints, and I would say until recently, no, we have not. And we haven't addressed the policy because we haven't gotten a lot of complaints. The issue as I see it in terms of communication has to do with when the assessment occurs, because the driver uses that assessment to position the vehicle at the stop. And once we've positioned the vehicle at the stop with the back door, in some cases, it's difficult to reposition, if not impossible. It's a real safety concern. We don't allow drivers to back the bus for obvious reasons, because they can't see behind them. And so it's a problem when the driver has not assessed it appropriately, because in many cases they can't tell because they don't have a visual disability. And then we're out of options in terms of what to do about it. Then it becomes, well, for next time, we'll get it right. Well, then we have to communicate that to other operators, and there's plenty of room for error. But again, I would say we've, until recently, not had a lot of issues with this. I would say that there is one way to ensure that everyone has access to the front door, and that is to rescind the policy and give everyone access through the front door. This policy was put into place by the previous mayor and myself in reaction to CDC guidelines. We merely had a discussion about it, and he said, put it into place, and so we did. This wasn't acted on by the council, this wasn't acted on by the Transit Commission, we just made it happen. As a transit system, we're willing to do whatever you suggest. I would be remiss if I suggested that we've gotten it right in every occasion, or that drivers made the correct decision. We had to make some corrections there. But I think we've been pretty consistent with that. As someone mentioned, we do have face mask policies in place. There is a federal mandate, so regardless of whether the governor's order was struck down today or not, we still have a federal mandate in place that we think is enforceable. We also have plexiglass barriers, as Becky mentioned, so there are more protections in place than when we implemented this policy. So that is the situation as I know it.
Okay, Deb first, thank you.
There's more virus.
No, Kathy, I'm sorry, I've called on Deb first, she's been waiting, then I'll call on you, okay? Thank you. No problem.
Thank you, Becky. I'm aware of more than two people that have concerns about the back door, and that one has had a cane and had requested it, and this week was said no, and was having difficulty. And I think there's a few other issues that we're not discussing, and it may not be that some of us have ridden the bus. I haven't in over a year or two, when I was out without a car for 3 months. So I have. For myself, I have a bad knee. So when they use the front door, I can get up. When they don't park it and kneel, I grab the rail like I'm mountain climbing to get up. And I'm 5'7". So we do have some others that may be smaller and having other difficulties. From my understanding as well, that the back door does not kneel. So that from my understanding, that first step may be 3 feet to get in. And then it's narrowed because of the doors that come apart. It is not designed for carts or people in wheelchairs or people with shopping carts. So that's the other thing. But with the ADA, we as individuals or the city are not to judge and, well, are they disabled? That's not something we are to be a judge. If people want to go in the front door, they should be allowed to, and that's under the federal laws of the American Disabilities Act. So I want to see this rescinded, and I believe Greg should know these laws. That's his field. And I guess I'm just surprised that the bus drivers don't know this. I've looked at a number of videos online on YouTube by both the directors as well as drivers that seem to know that. And and I'm hoping that Greg can clarify some of these issues. Thank you.
Kathy, go ahead.
I just want to say the variance is still out there. So I don't know. I still personally feel we should use the back door unless there's a request for the front door.
But here's the issue that I'm framing, that I heard Greg, is that if somebody asks for the front door and they're already past them, we have a problem. So it's not, that may be the issue, and especially with winter, when maybe these complaints were happening. So if the bus drivers are put in a position of, a block away trying to figure out which door to use, I don't want to put that onus on them and then say, oh, well, you're not following, you're not allowing me to use the door that I need to use. So, I guess what trumps what? I personally think ADA trumps this right now. I want to keep everybody as safe as possible. I think that, the vaccinations are a positive. I think the plexiglass is a positive. And we still have low ridership limits. I think that, it's the same as with the other city workers. We're doing the best we can. But we also all have a service that has to be done correctly. And I don't want people scared because they haven't seen a visual disability, and then somebody has to try to, scramble up those back steps. So I am for rescinding this. I think that it gives a clear message to the drivers that what they can and can't do, and I think that takes the onus off of them with the discretion portion. Alder Rasmussen, I see you have your hand up. We've limited this to no public comment. Do you have something to say about this limited scope?
I do. Actually, I'm glad to see that you guys are getting together today to talk about this. I agree with your comments. I think that early on during the pandemic, we put a lot of emergency protocols in place because there were so many unknowns about how the city and all of its departments would manage COVID. But since then, with the installation of plexiglass near the driver, vaccine availability opening up more and more, and the mask requirement that's been imposed at the federal level, I feel like the safety concerns that we had for drivers throughout this process is less than it was early on. And I agree, and it's my hope that the commission will change this procedure and allow all passengers that can enter through the front door.
Thank you. Go ahead, Greg. Mhm. Okay, Jen? Go
Jen
ahead.
had her hand up.
Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't hear you there. Quick question. So I'm all of these comments are definitely well taken. I just don't want it to look like we're not taking the desires of the drivers into consideration here. And I see that they're in a tough spot. Like on the one hand, they want to protect themselves, limit COVID exposure. On the other hand, they want to be able to provide people, pull up to them at the, at the distance people need them to pull up to, either for the front or the back door. And you can't necessarily know that ahead of time. So either way, I feel like they're kind of caught in the middle between those two different obligations. But have we talked with any drivers about what, do they feel similarly? Like all of these new precautions for COVID have lessened the risk and that wouldn't be as big of an issue? Like have we consulted with them?
Only anecdotally, the union president I had a chat with today, I wouldn't characterize his remarks on the matter as either being supportive or opposed. I think he's more concerned about how this came about and how it reflects on our employees. But he didn't weigh in either way. If I could weigh in, first of all, I would suggest to you that I'm pretty familiar with what the ADA requires, and the policy that is in place complies with the ADA. Drivers are supposed to allow front door boarding when somebody requests it. The problem is communicating that request is difficult because of the positioning of the vehicle that is required. Sometimes it happens after they have been forced to load through the back door. It was particularly a problem when there was snow on the ground because there are only so many openings we can load. It's better now, but it's not helpful when there's a utility pole that is now in the way or we have to back up. That's a safety problem. The other issue is we cannot pull into the stop and ask everyone, do they need the front door? Because once the door's open, people load, and then by default, it's a front door loading policy. So in my opinion, the only effective way to adequately communicate people's requests is to load them through the front door. I think that resolves the issue. And I would also add that communication during this policy, since we started this, has been difficult. The barriers have added to that difficulty. You know, in cases where we've tried to communicate people either through that barrier or through the front door, that's not an ideal situation. And so this, in addition to resolving the ADA issue, I think improves our communication. Is there an additional risk? Yes, there is. Passengers will be loading routinely within that 6-foot recommended distance. But as you've said, we've got masks in place, we have barriers. It's better than it was.
Go ahead, Pat.
Yeah, I'm ready. I'm not trying to push an immediate vote or anything, but I would make the motion that we go ahead and rescind the requirement that, you know, the front door, back door situation, that we rescind that and have the driver just make the initial stop with the front door and let it go.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any more comments or concerns that need to be raised before we vote? Seeing none, I'm going to do a roll call vote since we have people on WebEx. Does everybody understand the motion? I want to make sure. Okay. Ryan?
Aye.
Peckham?
Aye.
Bizzotto?
Aye.
Zorn?
Can I abstain?
No?
I say no. I say
Okay,
no right
okay. And I'm an aye, that's 4-1, that passes. Ends our meeting, and I'll take a motion to adjourn. Motion by Ryan, second by me.
Peckham.
Peckham, and we're adjourned. Thank you again for your time tonight. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair.